I screamed. I threw things. I repeated in disbelief, standing in the middle of a family courtroom while my ex-wife's lawyer painted me out like I was a monster. My palms were sweating, not from guilt, but because I knew I was one wrong word away from losing custody of my kids, possibly forever. Across from me sat her Jessica, once my wife, now the Venom in a silk dress. Blonde curls perfectly placed, crocodile tears glistening in her eyes as she sniffled dramatically for the judge. She wore betrayal like perfume, strong, fake, and suffocating. Your Honor, her attorney said, voice syrupy smooth, this is a woman in fear for her safety. She described the threats, the violent outbursts, and how he screamed at their children. We have every reason to believe Mr. Hunter poses a danger. I was done. That's a lie, I said, louder than I meant to. She's lying through her teeth. Mr. Hunter, the judge warned, raising a hand. I froze. I wanted to throw every memory I had of Jessica across that courtroom. Every late-night lie. Every fake smile at PDA meetings. Every whisper I caught her deleting from her phone under the covers. But I couldn't. Not here. Not with everything on the line. Then came the voice that sliced through the tension like a blade. Dad, said my 6-year-old, Eli, standing beside me, clutching his tablet. Can I play what Mom said last Friday? Everyone turned. The judge blinked. Jessica went pale. Her lawyer leaned forward, whispering urgently, but she didn't hear a word. Because Eli already pressed play. Her voice filled the courtroom, crystal clear. You better shut your mouth, Eli. If you ever tell your dad what I do when he's gone, I'll take your stupid tablet and smash it. Got it? There was a pause. Then her voice again, colder. And if he ever shows up early again, I'll tell the court he hit me. They always believe the woman, especially if I cry. You want to live with your loser dad? Good luck with his roach apartment. Gasps. The judge's pin dropped. Jessica didn't move. Not even a twitch. Her lawyer turned a sick shade of gray and slowly sat down. I felt my heartbeat in my ears. I wasn't sure if I was angry or broken, or just awake for the first time in months. The judge leaned forward. His tone changed completely. Mr. Hunter, we will reconvene in 15 minutes. Bailiff, escort Mrs. Hunter to the consultation room and take the device into evidence. Jessica finally moved. She reached for Eli. He recoiled. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. She wasn't just exposed. She was stripped. No more stories. No more lies. Just the ugly truth, playing on loop for a courtroom full of strangers. And in that moment, I realized. The affair wasn't the worst part. It was that she weaponized my own children against me, and still almost got away with it. That was just the beginning. 3 weeks before that courtroom bombshell, I was standing in our kitchen, pouring coffee into a chipped mug Jessica had once claimed was our first together. That morning, she walked in dressed in gym clothes that looked too polished for an actual workout, smelling like men's cologne, and didn't look me in the eye. I asked her if she wanted breakfast. She said she already ate. Then she left without kissing me goodbye. It was the 15th time that month. At first, I told myself it was stress. Her work, the kids, us. But then the lies started piling up so obviously, it almost felt like she wanted me to notice. Like that night she came home at 1:17 a.m., hair perfect, lipstick freshly applied. She claimed her boss made her work late at a private spa. I didn't confront her. Not yet. I needed to be smart, not emotional. Because the way she was acting, I knew she was building a story, probably laying the groundwork to make me look like the bad guy. I could feel it in how she subtly told neighbors I'd been moody lately or made comments like, you know how guys get when they feel threatened. I wasn't stupid. I was being set up. So I started watching. She'd leave her phone face down every night, even in the bathroom. Password changed. Notifications off. Once, while she showered, I heard a buzz and instinctively reached for it. A message flashed before it faded. When can I taste you again? I stared at the screen like it was poison. She came out a moment later, wrapped in a towel, and caught me staring at the table. Something wrong? She asked, smiling that venom-laced grin. No, I lied. Everything's perfect. That night, I didn't sleep. I waited. I watched. And over the next few days, I gathered everything. Every receipt she thought I wouldn't find. Every location she forgot to turn off. Even a necklace I found tucked into the glove box of her car, not the one I gave her. I made copies. I saved the texts. I even planted a tiny audio recorder in her purse. And on Friday, I struck gold. She was on the phone with someone she called Babe. Told him she'd pretend I hit her if it came to it. Said she'd cry on cue. then laughed about how easy it was to bend the courts if you're a woman with a good fake cry. That night, I didn't yell. I didn't throw anything. I just stared at her while she brushed her hair and told me she loved me, not realizing her voice was already recorded 3 different ways that week. The next morning, I made breakfast for the kids. Pancakes, strawberries, whipped cream. Jessica didn't come downstairs. She said she had a migraine. But I knew what it really was. She was hungover from the lies she drank too deep from. And Eli, sweet, brilliant Eli, he walked up to me holding his tablet and whispered, "Dad, I saved what Mom said. Want me to show you?" I froze. "Did you record it?" He nodded. I took the tablet from him, hit play, and listened. That's when everything inside me cracked and rearranged. It wasn't just me she was hurting. She was turning my son into a shield, a puppet, a witness to her madness. And he had enough awareness to protect me. That moment, I made my decision, not just to divorce her, but to expose every inch of who she really was. Not for revenge, for truth, for my son, for myself. And I promised I wouldn't stop until the world saw what I saw when the mask finally slipped. The day I served her the papers, she was halfway through curling her hair for what she said was a brunch with the girls. She barely looked up when I walked in. "Can you grab my nude heels from the closet?" "I'm running late," she muttered, still focused on her reflection. I dropped the envelope on the vanity in front of her. She glanced down, confused, then slowly picked it up. Her eyes flicked across the front page, and I watched her face morph from mild annoyance to full-blown rage. "What the hell is this?" "You know exactly what it is," I said calmly. "You played your hand. I'm just folding mine." Her lips curled. "You think you'll get the kids?" "Over my daddy." I stepped closer. "You think the court's gonna side with you after they hear everything you've said? After they listen to Eli's recordings? The threats, the manipulation, your smug little plan to ruin me?" She went quiet, but not because she was guilty. No, she was calculating. I could see it in her eyes, the gears spinning, trying to decide whether to scream, cry, or seduce. She chose cruelty. "Do you know what your problem is, Ryan? You never had the spine to keep me. You begged me to marry you. You're weak, boring, predictable." I laughed, not because it was funny, but because she really thought she still had power. "Jessica, you've lied so much you can't tell the difference between your mask and your face anymore." She stood up fast, knocking over her coffee. "I sacrificed for this family. You think I wanted to settle for a man like you? I stayed because I felt sorry for you." I didn't flinch. I just stared at her with the same silence she used to punish me during arguments. The silence she used to control every room. "Then it's good we're done," I said. "You don't owe me anything, and I owe you nothing." That night, she didn't come home. She texted to say she'd be at her sister's. I didn't respond. Instead, I sat with Eli and Emily on the couch, watching a movie, letting them fall asleep on my shoulders. My lawyer had already scheduled the custody hearing, and everything was ready: documents, recordings, timestamps. No yelling, no chaos, just facts. But even knowing I had the upper hand, I didn't feel victorious. I felt hollow. There's a strange ache that comes with watching someone burn down the house you built together and smiling while they do it. I remembered the nights we used to laugh in that kitchen, before her phone became a wall between us, before her smile started hiding things, before she started acting like kindness was a chore. I didn't lose a woman. I lost an illusion. And now that illusion was unraveling in real time, messy, brutal, but necessary. Still, I knew the worst wasn't over. Because the moment a woman like Jessica feels power slipping through her fingers, she doesn't surrender. She escalates. 3 days later, a police officer knocked on my door. I opened it with Eli by my side, holding a Lego piece in one hand and his blanket in the other. The officer looked at me with that tired, rehearsed expression, like he already knew he was about to deliver nonsense. "Mr. Hunter, we received a domestic disturbance report filed by your wife. She claims you threw objects at her in front of your children and used threatening language." My jaw tightened. Eli squeezed my hand. I stepped outside and shut the door behind me. "Officer, let me guess," she said. I screamed. Maybe even that I lunged at her. "Right?" He gave a half nod, unsure. "I haven't seen her since I handed her the divorce papers. And she didn't even sleep here that night. I suggest you pull the Nest camera footage from my front door before you take another step." He blinked. "You have recordings?" I pointed at the camera above the porch light. Motion activated. And before she moved out, she knew it was there. He radioed something in, listened to a response, then said, "All right, we'll follow up." Thanks for your cooperation. He left. That was her next move, frame me. She didn't want custody. She didn't want the kids. What she wanted was leverage. She wanted to destroy me before I could expose her. But she forgot one thing. My son wasn't on her side anymore. That night, Eli sat with me at the kitchen table, scribbling something in his notebook. He looked up. Dad? Yeah. Do you think if Mom lies again, the judge will believe me? I stared at him, then reached across the table and held his hand. They'll believe you, but because the truth doesn't need to shout. He nodded and went back to drawing. When the court day finally arrived, Jessica walked in dressed like a grieving widow, dark dress, minimal makeup, acting fragile. She even carried a tissue, like a prop. Her lawyer went first. He painted me as violent, irrational, and emotional risk to the children. He referenced incidents, never naming one specifically, just dropping phrases like patterns of aggression and hostile behavior. I kept my mouth shut. Then my lawyer stood and asked for permission to play a clip. The judge nodded. We connected Eli's tablet to the speaker system. And there she was again, Jessica's voice, cold and venomous, spitting threats at our son, mocking the system, bragging about faking abuse. The judge didn't say a word, just leaned back, arms crossed, eyes locked on her. Even Jessica's own lawyer didn't try to stop it. He lowered his head, knew he was done. After the clip ended, Eli asked, "Can I say something?" The judge nodded gently. "I don't want to live with Mom anymore," he said softly. "She's different when people aren't around. She's mean to Dad. She told me if I say stuff, she'd hurt my toys and say I lied. But I didn't lie." Jessica tried to speak, but the judge raised a hand. "Mrs. Hunter, I suggest you remain silent for your own benefit." For the first time in our entire relationship, she obeyed. And I knew I won't lose my kids. But this wasn't victory. It was survival. She tried to ruin me. She tried to make me a ghost in my own children's lives. And I could see it in her face she wasn't finished. She still had one more card to play. It happened the next morning. I was walking Eli to school when I noticed the other parents whispering. Some glanced at me and looked away fast. One mother I'd known for years clutched her daughter's hand tighter and crossed to the opposite side of the parking lot. I didn't get it until I opened Facebook during my lunch break and saw it. A post. Public. From Jessica. A photo of her arm with a faint bruise and the caption, "This is what emotional abuse looks like." My children saw this man lose control. I stayed silent for too long. No more. Protect your babies, even if it breaks you. Hundreds of likes. Dozens of comments. Stay strong, Jess. Sending you love. Praying for your healing. And right there in the thread, one person had the audacity to tag my job's official page. The smear campaign had begun. I stared at my phone as rage boiled inside me. I knew it was fake. She knew it was fake. But perception? It didn't care about facts. It cared about speed. And her lies were spreading like wildfire. I got a text from HR 2 hours later. They wanted to check in. Not an accusation, just a heads up. But it was clear my professional life was next on her list. She couldn't win in court, so now she was aiming for my reputation, my career, my sanity. That night, I sat in my car long after the kids had gone to bed. In the silence, I thought about every moment I had defended her, every lie I'd brushed aside, every time I blamed myself for her distance, her cruelty, her cheating. It wasn't just that she betrayed me. She weaponized the world against me. I called my lawyer. "We're going public," I said. "Everything. The recordings, the threats, the texts. We'll redact the kids' names, but the rest? No more silence. If she wants a war, she's going to get one." He hesitated. "Ryan, once you do this, there's no going back." I already went back too many times. I'm done. 2 days later, the post went live. Simple title, the other side of her story. No cursing. No name calling. Just clips, timestamps, screenshots. All factual. All cold. I wasn't asking for sympathy. I was demanding the truth be seen. It exploded. Thousands of shares. Comments flooded in. I believed her. "I'm so sorry. Thank you for speaking up. Men go through this too. This is why custody courts need reform." She tried to post a rebuttal, but no one believed her anymore. Not after the audio. Not after Eli's quiet words in court. She went dark on social media. But not before one last text hit my phone. "You think you've won. You'll regret humiliating me. No more playing defense. No more shrinking in shame." She built a castle out of lies. And I walked out with the only thing that mattered, the truth and my kids. A week passed. Then another. Things were quiet. Too quiet. Jessica wasn't texting. Wasn't calling. No surprise drop-ins. No late-night emails. Just silence. I should have felt relieved. I should have finally been able to breathe. But deep down, I knew her too well. Jessica wasn't the kind of woman who disappeared. She was planning something. Something louder than lies and more dangerous than drama. And then the email came. A formal complaint, filed with Child Protective Services. Anonymous, of course. Accusing me of neglect. That I left the kids alone for hours. That I yelled like a maniac. That I drank in front of them and drove them while drunk. My hands trembled as I read the lines. I didn't drink. I didn't yell. I was there. Every day. Every dinner. Every school form. Every bedtime story. It was all lies. But it didn't matter. Now CPS was coming to inspect my home. And once again, I was guilty until proven innocent. When the woman from the department arrived, she looked tired. She asked polite questions, peeked in the fridge, inspected the kids' rooms. Eli sat beside me on the couch, clutching my hand again, like he somehow knew this wasn't just another visitor. Emily was coloring in the dining room, humming softly to herself. "Do you drink, Mr. Hunter?" the woman asked. "No," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "Any history of violence?" "No." She took notes. Then Eli looked up and said, "Mom told me to say bad things about Dad if someone asked." The woman stopped writing. Eli looked at her, wide-eyed and serious. She said if I did, I get to live with her and her boyfriend at the lake house. But I don't want to. He yells a lot and he calls me names when Mom's not looking. Silence. She looked at me. I didn't speak. I just watched her process what my son had just said. "I'll be writing up my report this evening," she said, slowly rising to her feet. "For what it's worth, you're doing a good job. Don't let this break you." That night, I sat on the floor of the kids' room long after they'd fallen asleep. The nightlight glowed faintly on the wall, casting soft shadows over their faces. I realized then Jessica didn't care about winning custody. She didn't care about co-parenting, or even the kids. She wanted me ruined, not because she loved me, but because she couldn't control me anymore. That's what scared her. That's what made her dangerous. I wasn't her toy. I was the one man who saw the real her and walked away. And now she'd burned down everything to make sure I paid for it. It finally ended not with another courtroom battle or explosive confrontation, but with one more quiet twist. The judge's ruling came down after CPS cleared me completely. Full custody. Immediate. Jessica's visitation was suspended until a psychological evaluation could be completed. No warning. No appeals. No more chances. I was holding the paper in my hand, sitting on that same courthouse bench where it all began, when her lawyer rushed out into the hall, looking pale. "She's not coming," he muttered. "She left the state. Didn't even pack. She ran." I should have felt victorious. Instead, I felt numb. Not because I missed her. I didn't. Not even a little. But because I finally understood how much of my life had been spent begging for scraps of affection from a woman who didn't value anything real. Love, loyalty, family, she treated all of it like currency. Tradable. Dispensable. My kids deserved better. I deserved better. The next morning, I sat down with Eli and Emily at the kitchen table. No tension. No fake smiles. Just breakfast and peace. Eli looked up at me and asked, "Does this mean she's never coming back?" I paused. "I don't know, buddy. Maybe one day. But we don't have to be scared anymore." He nodded. Emily kept coloring, unbothered. Like she had already made peace with the storm leaving our house. And in that moment, I knew this was my new beginning. No lies. No cameras. No whispered threats. Just silence. And that silence was finally mine. If there's one thing I've learned through all of this, it's this. Sometimes, evil doesn't look like chaos. Sometimes, it wears perfume and smiles and family photos. Sometimes, it comes in the form of someone who says, "I love you," while planning your destruction behind your back. So if you ever feel something's wrong, trust it. Don't wait for evidence. Don't wait to catch them red-handed. Start documenting. Start protecting yourself. Because monsters aren't just under your bed. Sometimes, they sleep beside you. But the day you stop playing their game, that's the day you take your life back. And they can't follow you where truth lives.
Loud moans echoed from my office. At first, I thought it was just the sound of something strange happening in the house, maybe a door creaking or the wind pushing a window too hard. But the noises were persistent, rising in pitch, unmistakable. I recognized them immediately. Her. There was no mistaking it. I walked toward the door of my home office, my heart pounding. The same office where I'd spent countless hours working, building our life together. The same office that was supposed to be a sanctuary. But now it felt like a trap, the air growing thicker with every step. I reached the door and paused. I tried to rationalize the situation. Maybe I was mistaken. Maybe it was something else, some random noise my mind had misinterpreted. But deep down, I knew the truth. I'd felt it for weeks, a subtle shift, an undercurrent of deceit. The way she'd become distant, the way she'd glance at her phone but quickly look away when I approached. I'd seen the late nights, the unexplained absences, but I couldn't bring myself to believe it. Not until now. I opened the door quietly, just a crack, enough to peer inside. And there they were. My wife, Ashley, sprawled across the desk I had built with my own two hands, with another man. I didn't recognize him immediately. He was just some guy with an arrogant look on his face, his hands all over her, their bodies tangled in a way that made me sick to my stomach. She was moaning, that same sound I had heard echoing in the hallway, a sound that once might have stirred something in me. Now it made my blood boil. Her head snapped towards me, and for a split second, her face showed panic. But then she quickly recovered, putting on that same smug expression she always wore when she thought she could manipulate her way out of anything. "Oh, it's you," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "Of course, it's me," I replied, trying to keep my voice even. I wasn't going to let her see how much I was hurting, not now. "What are you doing, Ashley?" She looked at the man on the desk with her, and then back at me, a twisted smile curling at the edges of her lips. "What does it look like?" "I'm having some fun. Maybe you should try it sometime. You've been so caught up in your work, you don't even notice what's happening right under your nose." Her words cut deeper than any knife could. She knew how to twist the knife, always had. Always in control. Always making me feel like I was the problem. My mind raced. Every moment leading up to this, the late nights, the strange phone calls, her sudden need for space, they all clicked together in that instant. I wanted to scream, to demand answers. But I didn't. Instead, I turned around, walking past the doorway as if nothing was wrong, my every step calculated. Inside my office, Ashley and her lover didn't even try to hide anymore. They were too busy with each other, too engrossed in their own little world. I walked calmly to my desk, pulled open the drawer, and took out my gun. The cold steel felt oddly comforting in my hands. Ashley would probably laugh, call me crazy, accuse me of being dramatic. But I wasn't going to stand there, pretending I hadn't just been betrayed in the worst way possible. No. I would deal with this, my way. I wasn't going to beg for answers. I wasn't going to beg for her to care. Instead, I would prepare. I would wait for the right moment. And when it came, I would make sure she understood just how badly she had messed up. I stood in front of my desk, gun in hand, staring down at the polished wood. The weight of the weapon was heavier than it should have been, the cold metal a reminder of what I was about to do. It wasn't just about revenge, at least, not in the way people might think. It wasn't about hurting them physically, no, this was about taking back control. I heard the laughter from the office, the sound of Ashley and the man together, mocking my pain. I felt the heat rise in my chest. Anger. Shame. Betrayal. But strangely, there was no panic, no chaotic rush of emotions. Just cold, calculated clarity. I took a deep breath. This was my moment, the one I would look back on for the rest of my life. It could go any number of ways from here. But first, I needed answers. I stepped back into the office, this time more forcefully, swinging the door open wider. The couple didn't even flinch. If anything, they seemed annoyed that I'd interrupted their moment. What the hell is this, Ashley? I asked, my voice steady but with a sharp edge. You really think you can get away with this? Ashley's eyes flicked toward me, a flash of irritation crossing her face before she turned back to the man in her arms, a lazy smirk curling at the corner of her mouth. You still don't get it, do you? She said with a condescending laugh. I don't owe you anything, Steve. This isn't your problem anymore. So why don't you just get out of my way? The words stung like acid. Not my problem. I echoed, stepping forward. I could feel the tension crackling in the air. You've been lying to me for months, using me. And now you're telling me it's not my problem? She rolled her eyes, her body draped over the man like she didn't care in the least. The man, who I now realized had been just another nameless, faceless placeholder in her life, looked at me with a smug grin. Don't make a scene, buddy, he said, his voice dripping with condescension. She doesn't need you anymore. She's with me now. I froze. Every fiber in my body screamed to lash out. To shout, to scream, to knock that bastard on his ass. But something in me kept me calm. I didn't need to prove anything to them. They were beneath me now. They could think whatever they wanted. Just get out, Ashley repeated, her voice thick with disdain. You're pathetic, Steve. You always were. I've been looking for someone who knows how to handle me, someone who's not so obsessed with his work. This is what I need. Not you, not anymore. It hit me like a punch to the gut. The sheer audacity. She didn't even care. She had no remorse. This was just a game to her. Is that really how you see it? I asked quietly, staring at her. She didn't even look at me as she shifted her weight, running her hands over the man's chest. She didn't care about what I was feeling. She didn't care about anything but herself. It was like I wasn't even there. The man was right. She didn't need me anymore. But something inside me snapped. I couldn't just stand there and let them laugh at me. Not now. Not when everything had led to this moment. I pointed the gun toward the floor, more out of instinct than anything else. I wasn't here to make threats. I was here to be heard. I'm not going anywhere, I said, my voice colder now. And neither are you. You're going to explain yourself, Ashley. Right here. Right now. No more lies, no more games. Ashley's eyes finally met mine. For the first time, I saw something flicker behind those cold, calculating eyes. It wasn't regret. No. It was fear. For the first time, she realized I wasn't just going to let this slide. I wasn't going to beg for her love anymore, wasn't going to cry over her mistakes. Her lover, my replacement, wasn't so confident anymore either. I could see the unease in his eyes as he backed up slightly, unsure of how to handle the situation. But Ashley? She didn't flinch. She didn't care. You really think you can control me, Steve? She sneered. You've always been so obsessed with controlling everything. You never let me breathe. But now? Now, you've lost. You don't have power over me anymore. I looked down at the gun in my hands, weighing my options. I could feel the tension between us building. I could feel the urge to end it all right there, to finally put an end to this farce of a marriage. But deep down, I knew that wouldn't be the answer. The satisfaction would be fleeting. It wasn't what I needed. No, I said, lowering the gun slowly. You're wrong, Ashley. You've already lost. And it's not because of me. It's because of who you are. I could see her expression change. The mask of indifference was slipping. She was starting to realize something I already knew, that I didn't need her anymore. Get out, I told her, my voice steady now, final. You don't belong here. Not anymore. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. As Ashley grabbed her things and stormed out of the office with her lover, I stayed in the quiet, calm that followed. I had finally taken control. I stood there for a long time after Ashley stormed out of the room. The silence that filled the space was almost suffocating, like the air had been sucked out of the room. My office, once a place of ambition and productivity, now felt like a tomb. I could still hear the echo of her cruel words ringing in my ears, and I felt something in my chest tighten. But not in the way I expected. It wasn't pain. It wasn't anger anymore. It was clarity. The weight of what had just happened settled over me. It wasn't just the end of my marriage, it was the end of a version of myself I had clung to for too long. The husband who tried to fix everything. The man who thought he could save her. The man who thought he could save us. I walked over to the window, pulling back the blinds slightly. I could see Ashley's car speeding down the street, leaving the house behind. The house that had once felt like our home, a symbol of everything we built together, now felt like a prison. It wasn't just her I was getting rid of, it was the version of myself that allowed this to happen. I set the gun down on the desk and sat in the chair, staring at the empty space where she had been just minutes ago. The betrayal had stung, but now it was just gone. I didn't need to cry or scream. I didn't need to beg her to come back. I had let go of the dream, and with it, all the weight that had been dragging me down for years. I picked up my phone and called a number I hadn't dialed in months. "Hey, Steve, how's it going?" It was Chris, one of my old friends from college. We had drifted apart over the years, mostly because of Ashley. She didn't like me hanging out with other people, especially Chris. But now, it felt right. I needed someone to talk to, someone who wasn't tangled up in the mess that was my life with Ashley. "Chris," I said, my voice steady, "I need you to come over. I need to talk." It wasn't long before Chris showed up. I didn't even bother with pleasantries. I just led him straight into my office, where we both sat down in the chairs that once seemed so familiar. Chris eyed me carefully, sensing that something had changed. He didn't push for details right away, he knew better. We were friends, but he also knew the kind of man I'd been when it came to relationships. "Is it over?" he asked after a long pause, his voice low. I nodded, trying to keep my composure. "Yeah. It's over. How are you feeling?" I stared at him for a moment, the question hanging between us. How was I feeling? I wasn't sure. There were so many layers to this. Betrayal, loss, freedom, regret. But there was also something else. Something that hadn't been there in years. A sense of power. "I feel like I've been walking around in a fog for the past few months," I confessed. "But now it's like everything is finally clear." Chris raised an eyebrow. "You sure about that? You've been stuck in this marriage for so long, man. You sure you want to let it go that easily?" I could see the concern in his eyes. He didn't want me to make any rash decisions. But the truth was, I had been drowning for years. I had tried everything to save something that wasn't even there anymore. And now that I had taken control, it felt like a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. "It's not easy," I admitted. "But it's the right thing. For both of us. I've been holding on to a dream of her for so long, but she's not the woman I married anymore. And I'm not the man I used to be. I need to move on." Chris didn't say anything for a while. He just nodded. He understood. We had both seen how Ashley had changed over the years, how manipulative she had become. How she had made me feel small, insignificant. How I had allowed it. But the truth was, I had known for a long time. I had been in denial, hoping things would get better. But now I had no more illusions. "I get it, man," Chris said, his voice firm. "But you're not alone in this. You've got people who care about you. You've got me. I nodded, grateful. It felt good to hear those words. I wasn't as alone as I thought. There was a world out there beyond Ashley. There were people who hadn't given up on me, who still saw the man I could be. And that was enough for me. It had to be. The next few days were a blur. I didn't bother calling Ashley. I didn't care about what she was doing or where she was going. I had other things to focus on, things that mattered. I spent time going over the details of our finances, looking into how I could start fresh. I contacted a lawyer, though I didn't know yet if I wanted to take that step. It felt like I was walking through a thick fog, but with each passing hour, I felt more sure of my decisions. But then, just when I thought I was finally moving forward, I received a call. It was from an unfamiliar number. "Steve," the voice on the other end said. It was Ashley. I could already feel my blood start to boil. I had no idea what she was going to say, but I wasn't about to listen to her lies anymore. Not now. "Don't," I said, cutting her off before she could speak. "I've heard enough from you. You don't understand." "No. You don't understand," I snapped. "I'm done. You made your choice. Now I'm making mine." And with that, I hung up. The call didn't bring relief. But it did remind me of one thing: Ashley's influence on my life was finally over. The worst was behind me. The silence in my home that followed the phone call with Ashley was deafening. I'd hung up with such finality that even I was surprised. But it was the right thing. No more lingering on what might have been. No more hoping she would somehow return to the person I thought I married. I spent the next few days in a sort of detached daze. I worked through the motions of life, cooking, cleaning, managing my business, but something was different. A part of me that had been dormant for so long was waking up. I had no idea where this was going to lead, but for the first time in months, I felt free. Freedom. It was an odd sensation, one I hadn't expected. I kept telling myself that the hard part was over. The confrontation, the realization, the end of the marriage, that had been the storm. Now, it was time for me to find my footing in the calm. I had to figure out who I was without her, without the weight of her manipulation holding me back. But freedom didn't come without its own challenges. A few days after the call with Ashley, I was at my office when I received an unexpected knock on the door. It wasn't Chris. It wasn't a colleague. It was a stranger. I opened the door, and standing there was a tall, athletic man in a dark suit. He had an air of authority about him, the kind of person who exuded power without saying a word. He introduced himself as Peter Collins, a private investigator. I blinked, confused. A private investigator? What's this about? Peter stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, his eyes scanning the room before focusing on me. "I'm sorry to intrude, Mr. Harris, but I need to speak with you about your wife." I took a step back. I didn't need to hear anything about Ashley right now. She was out of my life. Or so I thought. "Look, I'm not interested. If this is about her, I don't care." Peter didn't flinch. "I understand your frustration, but I think you need to hear me out. This isn't what you think. I've been hired to track Ashley's movements over the past several months. There are things you don't know, things you need to hear." My heart skipped a beat. The last thing I wanted was to dive back into that mess. But curiosity got the better of me. I motioned for him to sit down. "All right. Fine. Tell me what you've got." Peter took a deep breath before speaking. "I'm going to be blunt with you. What I found out is worse than what you think. Ashley didn't just cheat on you with one man. There's more to the story, many more men. In fact, I believe she's been using you to cover up something much larger than a simple affair." I stood frozen, the blood draining from my face. What do you mean? Are you saying she was seeing more than one person at the same time? Peter nodded grimly. Exactly. And it's not just casual. She's been running a whole network of affairs with men who are involved in some very shady dealings. I'm not at liberty to say more, but trust me, you don't want to get mixed up in this any deeper. My mind was spinning. This was something else entirely. Ashley wasn't just a cheating wife. She was tangled up in something dangerous, something I couldn't have imagined. The betrayal wasn't just personal, it was connected to something far more sinister. I had spent so long blaming myself, trying to figure out what I had done wrong. But the truth was, she had been playing me the entire time. I felt a cold chill run down my spine. And why are you telling me this? What's your angle? Peter leaned forward slightly, his expression serious. Because you deserve to know the truth. And frankly, you need to protect yourself. If Ashley is mixed up with people like this, it's only a matter of time before they start coming after you. This isn't just about a broken heart. This is about your safety. She's already dragged you into this without your knowing. The sooner you understand that, the better. I felt a rush of emotions, confusion, disbelief, fear, but most of all, anger. I had been living in a bubble, imagining that ending my marriage would be the end of it. But now I realized I was just getting started. I wasn't just going to walk away from this mess. I was going to take control. Give me everything you've got, I said, my voice tight with resolve. I'm not going to let her, or anyone else, drag me down. I've had enough of being manipulated. I want to know who I'm dealing with. Peter handed me a thick folder of documents, photographs, and notes. He stood up and started to walk toward the door, pausing before he left. I'm doing this because I believe you deserve to know, Steve. But be careful. You're not just fighting your ex-wife anymore. You're going up against something bigger than you realize. The door closed behind him, and I sat there staring at the pile of evidence in my hands. This was no longer just a personal betrayal. Ashley's actions had dragged me into a world I didn't understand, and I wasn't sure how deep this rabbit hole went. But one thing was clear, I wasn't going to back down. Not now. I spent the rest of the evening going through the files Peter had given me. The more I uncovered, the more I realized just how deep Ashley's betrayal had run. She wasn't just a liar and a cheat, she had been living a double life, hiding a trail of lies and manipulation. But there was something else buried in those files that caught my attention, a series of photographs showing Ashley with a man I didn't recognize. He wasn't just any man. He was someone with serious connections. I felt a new resolve building inside me. If Ashley thought she could walk away from this without facing the consequences, she was gravely mistaken. I wasn't going to let her ruin my life and get away with it. Not when I had a chance to finally understand the full picture. The game had changed. And now, I was playing to win. The evening had fallen silent as I sifted through the photographs Peter had given me. Each one seemed to tell a different story, Ashley with a man in a posh restaurant, Ashley in a hotel lobby with a figure I couldn't fully make out, and then there were the cryptic notes written in what seemed like code. This wasn't just about a cheating wife anymore. This was about something much darker, something that had been hiding right under my nose for months, maybe even years. I stared at one photograph in particular. It showed Ashley standing beside a man, tall, dark, and sharply dressed. He didn't look like a random lover. There was something about the way they stood together, the subtle closeness of their bodies, the way they exchanged glances that told me they shared a connection deeper than I had ever realized. I picked up my phone and called Peter. The phone rang a few times before he answered, his voice steady but guarded. Peter, who the hell is this guy? I asked, trying to keep my voice even. What's going on here? Who is she involved with? There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Finally, Peter spoke, his voice lower now. Steve, this is bigger than just your wife's infidelity. The man in those photos? His name is Marco Ferrara. He's connected to some very dangerous people. You don't want to get mixed up in this. I could feel my pulse quicken as I leaned forward. You're telling me she's been involved with someone like that? And you didn't think I needed to know sooner? I didn't have all the details until recently, Peter explained, his tone urgent. Look, Ashley's been playing a game, and you've been the pawn. She's been feeding information to these people, but I don't think you've realized how deep it goes. I'm telling you, Steve, there are people involved who will stop at nothing to protect their interests. My mind was spinning. This wasn't just a broken marriage anymore. It was a full-blown conspiracy, and Ashley was at the center of it. I had no idea how I had missed it, how I had allowed myself to be blind to the manipulation. She had been playing me for a fool while working behind the scenes with people who would tear apart anyone who got in their way. What do I do? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. I wasn't afraid of her anymore, but this was different. The stakes had changed. First things first, Peter replied, get out of your house. Get out of sight. It's not safe for you right now. These people, they don't play by the rules. If they think you know too much, they'll come for you. They'll come for everyone you care about. Trust me. I could feel a cold sweat break out on the back of my neck. I had been living under the illusion that once Ashley was out of my life, things would get better. But the truth was, my life had just become infinitely more complicated. I wasn't just fighting my ex-wife anymore. I was fighting a dangerous underworld of criminals, and I was caught right in the middle of it. Peter, I don't have anywhere to go, I said, panic starting to rise in my chest. I'm not leaving town. I'm not going to let her, or them, get away with this. Peter's voice softened, almost like he was trying to calm me down. You have to think carefully, Steve. I know you're angry. But right now, you need to play it smart. Lay low. Find a safe place. I'll keep an eye on things from here. But you can't just go charging in blindly. I didn't want to listen. But the reality of the situation was sinking in. This wasn't something I could handle on my own. I needed help. All right, I said, my voice resigned. I'll lay low. But I'm not giving up on this. The next few hours felt like a blur. I packed a bag, grabbed a few essentials, and left my house behind. I didn't even know where I was going, just that I couldn't stay in the place that had once felt like home. Not with everything I had learned. I found a small, inconspicuous hotel on the outskirts of town, checked in under a fake name, and locked the door behind me. I didn't feel safe anywhere, but this would have to do for now. I sat on the edge of the bed, my mind racing. I couldn't keep running from this. I couldn't live in fear. But how the hell was I supposed to take down a criminal network that had Ashley at the center of it all? I tried to calm myself, but it was hard. The adrenaline was still pumping through my veins. It wasn't just about the affair anymore. It was about revenge. But not in the way I had initially imagined. No, this was bigger. This was a game that I had to play smarter than I had before. And it had to be done on my terms. As I sat there, the weight of the situation settled on me. I wasn't just playing for my own life anymore. I was playing for my freedom. I was playing to protect what little I had left. I didn't have all the answers, but I had one thing, determination. I would get to the bottom of this. I would expose Ashley for what she was, expose everyone involved. And when it was all over, I would finally take back what was mine. But as I sat in that room, one thought lingered in the back of my mind, chilling me to the core: they were coming for me. And it wasn't just Ashley anymore. The game had become more dangerous. The stakes were higher. And I had no choice but to play along. I spent the next few days holed up in the small hotel room, doing my best to stay out of sight. The paranoia was starting to creep in. Every knock on the door made me jump, every passing car made me look out the window. I had no idea who was watching, who was out there. I was like a sitting duck, but I didn't have the luxury of time to wait for the storm to pass. The more I dug through the files Peter had given me, the clearer it became that I was only scratching the surface. The photos of Ashley and the man, Marco Ferrara, kept repeating in my mind, each glance a reminder of the dangerous web she'd woven around herself. But Marco wasn't just some random lover. Peter had mentioned the criminal connections, and after doing some digging of my own, I had learned that Marco wasn't just any criminal. He was connected to a trafficking ring that spanned several states. Ashley had been feeding them information, setting up deals, and making sure the operation ran smoothly. That meant that I was involved in something far bigger than I had ever anticipated. Every day, I felt myself sinking deeper into the hole I had no idea how to climb out of. I barely slept, the weight of it all keeping me awake at night. But on the third day of my isolation, there was a knock on my door. I froze. My heart pounded in my chest, my breath caught in my throat. No one was supposed to know where I was. Cautiously, I moved toward the door, peeking through the peephole. I felt a rush of relief when I saw who it was, Chris. He wasn't part of the mess I had been dragged into, and I knew I could trust him. But even seeing him didn't erase the anxiety gnawing at my gut. What the hell was I getting myself into? I opened the door slowly, letting him inside. His face was grim, his expression unreadable. I stepped aside, and he entered without a word. "What's going on?" I asked, the tension in my voice impossible to mask. "Do you have something new for me?" Chris nodded, sitting down in the chair across from me. "I know you're not going to like this, but I'm here because I need you to listen. I've been doing some digging of my own. And Steve, this thing, it's worse than I thought." I leaned forward, heart thudding in my chest. "What do you mean worse?" "Your wife," Chris began slowly, "she's not just playing you. She's using you. You're the last person I thought would get caught up in this, but the more I dig, the more I see you were just a pawn. She's playing a much bigger game." His words hit me like a slap to the face. I had already known I'd been played, there was no way I could deny it after everything that had happened. But hearing it from Chris made it real in a way that stung. Still, I pushed myself to keep calm. How did she get into this? Why didn't I see it? Chris's eyes darkened, and he hesitated before answering. "It goes back to the money. She's always been about the money. I think she got involved with the wrong crowd years ago. Maybe she was in over her head, maybe she was doing things to maintain the lifestyle she wanted. But somewhere along the way, she got tied up with Ferrara's people. And now, they own her." The realization hit me hard. Ashley had never been the loving, devoted wife I thought she was. She'd been playing a dangerous game with people who didn't care about loyalty, or trust, or anything I'd ever believed in. They had manipulated her just as easily as she had manipulated me. And now, I was left with nothing but the wreckage of a marriage that was never real. I stood up suddenly, pacing the room. "What the hell am I supposed to do now, Chris? I'm already in deep, I can feel it. I can't just walk away. I'm not going to let her, and them, win." Chris looked at me with a mixture of concern and admiration. "You're right. You can't just walk away. But you need to think about this carefully. You're dealing with dangerous people, Steve. They'll go to any lengths to cover their tracks. And Ashley? She's not the woman you thought she was. She's in too deep. You have to ask yourself whether you want to keep fighting for her, or if you want to walk away and let it all go up in flames." The words stung, but they were the truth. And deep down, I knew it. But how could I let it all go? How could I simply walk away from everything I'd invested in? From the years I had spent building this life with her, only to find out it was all a lie? But as I stood there, something inside me shifted. It wasn't about saving the marriage anymore. It wasn't about her. It was about me. It was about taking back my life, my power. I wasn't going to let Ashley or Ferrara, or anyone, control me any longer. I turned to Chris, determination settling in my chest. I'm not giving up. But I'm going to need help. I can't do this alone. Chris stood up and placed a hand on my shoulder. You've got me, Steve. And I know some people who can help. But we have to be careful. The deeper we go, the more dangerous this gets. You need to be ready for anything. And with those words, I knew I had no choice but to see this through. The game had changed, and now it was time to play it on my terms. That night, I didn't sleep. I spent the hours organizing my next steps, making calls, and preparing myself for the storm that was coming. The stakes had never been higher. I wasn't just fighting for my marriage anymore. I was fighting for my life. And Ashley? She was about to find out that I wasn't going to be the pawn anymore. This was war, and it wasn't just for my heart, it was for my survival. The next few days were a blur of activity. Chris had connected me with some trusted individuals who could help. One of them, a former investigator with connections to law enforcement, was already digging into Marco Ferrara's dealings. The deeper we went, the darker it became. Ferrara wasn't just a criminal, he was a mastermind, pulling strings in a vast network of illegal operations that spanned across states. Ashley had been involved in this world for a lot longer than I'd realized. She wasn't just an innocent bystander. She'd been one of the key players, carefully maneuvering in the shadows, manipulating everyone around her, including me. I was starting to see the full picture. She had been using me for years, keeping me just close enough to maintain her facade of the perfect wife, while her real work was happening in the background. Each new detail only pushed me further away from the man I had once been. I was no longer the naive husband who believed that love could overcome all obstacles. No, I was something else now. Someone colder, someone who knew exactly how high the stakes were. And I was ready to play this game until the very end, even if it meant getting my hands dirty. I sat in a small cafe one evening, meeting with Chris and his contact, Tom, a former FBI agent who had agreed to help me navigate the murky waters of criminal networks. Tom was grizzled, with a hard look in his eyes that told me he'd seen his fair share of violence. We didn't waste time with pleasantries. The situation was too urgent. Here's what we know, Tom said, sliding a folder across the table. Ferrara's operations go deeper than you think. It's not just about the trafficking. We're talking money laundering, illegal arms deals, and worst of all, ties to political figures who will do anything to keep their connections quiet. I felt my stomach tighten. I had no idea how deep Ashley had gotten into all of this. She wasn't just playing with fire. She was a part of it, feeding information to Ferrara's people, using her position as my wife to get access to places she otherwise wouldn't have been able to reach. Where does Ashley fit into all this? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Was she always this way? Tom didn't hesitate. She's been working for Ferrara for at least 5 years. I don't know what the full deal was between them, but she was never just a good wife or an innocent bystander. She knew what she was doing. And she knew exactly how to keep you distracted while she ran her operations. I felt like I was suffocating. I had spent so long believing that the worst thing about Ashley was her infidelity, but this was a betrayal of an entirely different magnitude. She wasn't just someone who had cheated. She was part of a dangerous world that could ruin everything I had built, and everything I cared about. I slammed my fist on the table, making the cups rattle. I trusted her. I gave her everything. How could I not see this? How could I be so blind? Chris put a hand on my shoulder. You're not the only one who's been blindsided, Steve. You're not alone in this. But now we know what we're up against. We can take her down, but we have to be smart. You can't just charge in blindly. I nodded, my mind racing. What's our next move? Tom's expression grew serious. We get to Ferrara. The more we dig, the more we realize that he's not just some street thug. He's playing a bigger game. But Ashley? She's a liability now. She's no longer valuable to him, and that makes her dangerous. She might try to cover her tracks, but she's also a loose end. We have to make sure she doesn't get away with this. The words hit me hard. Ashley was now expendable in Ferrara's eyes. She was no longer a trusted ally, she was a problem that needed to be dealt with. And I was caught in the middle of it all. I'm done playing by her rules, I muttered under my breath. I'm done letting her use me. Tom leaned back in his chair. Good. But you need to make a decision. You can't afford to hesitate. Ferrara will be watching. And Ashley? She's not going to sit idly by while we expose everything. The weight of it all settled in. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that everything was falling apart. I had no illusions left about Ashley. She wasn't the woman I had married. She wasn't even the person I thought I knew. She was a liar, a manipulator, and now she was part of something that could destroy us both. I spent the next few days making preparations. I needed leverage, something I could use to force Ashley's hand. We weren't going to let her get away with this. We had to push her into a corner where she couldn't lie her way out. That's when I decided to pay her a visit. The idea of seeing her again made my stomach turn. But I had no choice. If I was going to put an end to this madness, I needed answers from her. And I wasn't going to settle for the lies anymore. This time, it was different. I had the power. I drove to the upscale condo she had moved into after everything had gone down. It felt surreal walking toward the door, my heart pounding in my chest. But as I knocked, I reminded myself that this wasn't about closure or forgiveness. This was about control. This was about reclaiming the life she had stolen from me. She answered the door in a silk robe, looking just as composed and flawless as she always did. But there was something different in her eyes, a flicker of fear that I hadn't seen before. Well, she said, her voice dripping with feigned surprise. To what do I owe the pleasure? I stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, my mind already focused on what needed to happen. I'm done, Ashley. I know everything. And it's time to face the consequences. Her expression shifted, and for the first time, I saw a crack in the mask she had worn for so long. She tried to recover, but I could hear the nervousness creeping into her voice. What are you talking about? I pulled out the files Peter had given me, the photos, the evidence, the names. I slapped them down onto her marble kitchen counter. You're done. It's over. You thought you could play me, but I know what you've been up to. All of it. And it's time for you to pay. Her eyes flickered to the papers, and I could see her calculation. She wasn't afraid of me, she was afraid of the truth. You think you can just waltz in here and make demands, she sneered, her tone turning cold. You're nothing, Steve. You always were. Something inside me snapped. Her words weren't just venomous, they were a last-ditch attempt to control me. And I wasn't going to let her. I stood my ground, my resolve hardening. No, Ashley. This time, you're the one who's going down. There was a tense silence between us, thick with the weight of everything that had led to this moment. Her eyes burned with defiance, but I could see the crack in her confidence. For the first time in what felt like forever, she wasn't in control. And it felt damn good. I'm not going to let you get away with this, I said, my voice low and steady. I wasn't bluffing anymore. This wasn't just a confrontation, it was the end of everything she had built with lies and manipulation. She laughed, the sound cold and mocking. You think you have power now? You don't know what you're dealing with. Ferrara doesn't care about your little game. You're nothing to him. And you'll be nothing to me, too, once I'm done. Her words stung, but they weren't enough to shake me. She had always been the master of manipulation, but now, I could see right through her. I knew she was afraid. She wasn't as untouchable as she thought. I had the evidence, and with it, I had a choice. I wasn't just going to tear her down emotionally, I was going to dismantle her entire world. Listen, Ashley, I said, my tone softening just a touch to make her think I was still playing the old Steve. I don't want this. I don't want to destroy you. But I'm not going to let you ruin me anymore. Her eyes flickered with something, maybe fear, maybe desperation, but whatever it was, she quickly masked it with a bitter smile. You're weak. You've always been weak. I've never needed you, Steve. I never did. And now you're going to regret this. I didn't respond immediately. I watched her carefully, weighing my next move. But then, in an unexpected shift, her demeanor changed. The arrogance drained from her face, replaced by something I hadn't expected, a pleading look. You don't have to do this, she said, her voice suddenly small, almost vulnerable. I never meant for it to go this far. I was scared. Ferrara, he promised me everything. But I never thought it would end like this. I didn't think I'd lose you. I felt a sudden, strange twinge of emotion. Maybe it was the remnants of the man I once was, the man who still cared, or maybe it was just the shock of hearing her admit something I didn't think she was capable of. But in that moment, I saw the cracks in her mask. She wasn't just a calculating villain, she was a woman who had made choices driven by fear and greed. You're not the person I married, I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. And that's the hardest part for me to accept. But you need to understand, you've done things that can't be undone. No matter how sorry you are now. She didn't respond at first, her gaze shifting from defiance to something else. I don't want to lose everything, Steve. I don't want to lose you. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. For a second, I almost believed her. Almost. But I couldn't forget what she had done. I couldn't unsee the woman who had lied to me, used me, and torn apart everything we had built. Then why did you betray me? I asked, finally letting the frustration and hurt bleed into my voice. Why did you let yourself get involved with Ferrara and all of this? You could have stopped, Ashley. You didn't have to keep lying. Tears welled up in her eyes, and for the first time, I saw her as a broken woman, not the cold, calculating person who had betrayed me. I was in too deep, Steve. I didn't know how to get out. I thought I could fix it, but the more I got pulled in, the harder it became to walk away. I didn't want to hurt you. I never wanted to hurt you. I stared at her, the woman I once loved, and felt a strange knot twist in my chest. The truth was, I didn't know what to believe anymore. But one thing was clear, I couldn't let her walk away from this unscathed. She had made her choices, and now it was time to face the consequences. I took a deep breath and stepped back from her. You've made your bed, Ashley. And now you're going to lie in it. Her expression darkened again. You think this is over? You think you can just expose me and walk away clean? You have no idea what Ferrara will do to you. To both of us. You think you can just walk away from this? The tension in the room skyrocketed, and for the first time, I understood the gravity of her words. Ferrara was a monster, and if he found out I had crossed him, I wouldn't be safe. Ashley might have been my wife, but she had just as much to lose. More, even. She had nothing left to lose. I'm not afraid of Ferrara anymore, I said, my voice firm. If you think I'll let you drag me down with you, you're wrong. The sound of a car engine revving outside caught my attention, and my heart skipped a beat. I knew it was no coincidence. We weren't alone anymore. Ferrara's men were here. And it was too late to turn back now. "Steve, you need to leave," Ashley whispered urgently, her face pale. "Now. If you stay, you'll never get out of here alive." I froze. Her plea seemed genuine, but there was a catch to it. I had no way of knowing if she was trying to save me, or if this was just another one of her games. But then something shifted in me. The reality hit harder than I expected. This wasn't just about Ashley anymore. This was about survival. I could let her play me, or I could make a choice. A final choice. The door to the condo burst open, and 3 men walked in, their faces shadowed, their eyes cold with intent. I didn't flinch. This was it. There was no going back now. But then something unexpected happened. One of the men, the one at the front, stopped dead in his tracks. He looked at me, then at Ashley, and slowly his eyes softened. "Steve," he said, his voice hesitant. I blinked, caught off guard. The man wasn't a stranger. I recognized him. He was one of Ferrara's associates, someone I had met once, years ago. His name was Carlo. "What the hell are you doing here?" I asked, confused and more than a little suspicious. Carlo's gaze flickered to Ashley, then back to me. He took a step forward, lowering his gun. "I don't work for Ferrara anymore," Carlo said quietly. "I'm here to help you. This whole thing, it's not what you think." For a moment, everything stood still. The room, the people, the chaos, it all seemed to stop. And in that single, unexpected moment, everything shifted. Ashley's face drained of color, and for the first time, I saw real fear in her eyes. The game had changed. And I had just been handed the upper hand. "This isn't over, Ashley," I said, my voice calm, but my eyes cold. Not by a long shot. I wasn't supposed to be home that morning. I'd left in a rush, as always, juggling coffee, briefcase, and the mounting pressures of my day job. But somewhere halfway to the office, I realized I'd forgotten my keys on the kitchen counter. Cursing under my breath, I made a quick U-turn, intending to dash in, grab them, and head out without even taking off my shoes. As I stepped inside the house, something felt off. The air was thick, almost as if it carried secrets I wasn't meant to uncover. I froze mid-step at the sound of my wife, Emily, talking in the kitchen. Her voice, usually honeyed and warm, was sharp and conspiratorial. I leaned against the wall, my pulse quickening, ears straining to catch her words. "My husband is such an idiot," she sneered. My heart thudded painfully in my chest, disbelief rushing through my veins. "If your detectives don't find anything compromising on him, then we'll end up with nothing." I stood there, rooted in place, the weight of her betrayal pressing down on me like a ton of bricks. Detectives? Compromising evidence? What was this, a thriller movie? But it wasn't a movie, it was my life, and the star villain was my wife. My breath caught in my throat as I processed the scene. Emily was scheming against me with someone else. I couldn't hear the other voice clearly, but it was there, a low, smug murmur that made my blood boil. I didn't need to know who it belonged to, the fact that it wasn't me was enough. My fists clenched instinctively, anger bubbling up inside me like a volcano about to erupt. But then, a thought stopped me. Reacting now would only give her the upper hand. No, I needed a plan, something calculated, something that would give me control of this spiraling situation. Quietly, I backed out of the house and returned to my car, my heart pounding like a war drum. I sat behind the wheel, gripping it tightly as I stared blankly out the windshield. Every part of me wanted to storm back in there, demand answers, yell, break things, anything to release the storm raging inside me. But instead, I grabbed my phone and dialed a number I never thought I'd need, my lawyer. "Mark, I need your help," I said, my voice tight with restrained fury. "This is about Emily. And it's serious." As I explained what I'd overheard, Mark didn't mince words. "We'll start immediately," he said firmly. "You're not alone in this. Let's handle it the smart way." The smart way. I repeated the phrase in my head like a mantra as I drove away from the house, my keys still sitting on the counter. The life I thought I had, the wife I thought I knew, was unraveling faster than I could comprehend. And I wasn't about to let her walk away from it unscathed. Driving away from the house, my mind raced. Each memory of Emily now felt like a puzzle piece I needed to re-examine. That laugh she always used to brush off my questions about her late-night outings, had it been fake? The sudden rush to get off the phone when I walked into the room, was that her lover on the line? I felt like a fool, blindsided in a marriage I thought was solid. But this wasn't the time for self-pity. Emily had crossed a line, and she'd chosen to do it in the most underhanded way possible. She was plotting against me, banking on me being too naive to notice. That was her mistake. Mark called me back within the hour. "This could get messy," he warned. "But we can stay ahead of her. I'll need details, financial documents, anything you can provide." "I'll get them," I promised. And I meant it. Emily might think she had me pegged, but she didn't know the side of me that could play dirty when pushed. I would do whatever it took to protect myself, to expose her for the person she really was. That evening, I returned home like nothing had happened. Emily greeted me at the door with her usual practiced smile. If I hadn't overheard her betrayal earlier, I might have believed her act. But now, her sweetness felt like venom disguised as honey. "Hey, babe. Long day," she chirped, leaning in for a kiss. Her lips barely brushed mine before she pulled away, already walking toward the living room. "Yeah," I muttered, forcing a casual tone. "Non-stop meetings." "You?" "Oh, just errands and house stuff," she said, waving a hand as if her day had been mundane. But I noticed her phone in her other hand, clenched tightly. Her grip on it was white-knuckled, like she was afraid I'd reach for it. I played along, sinking into the couch beside her and asking about dinner. She rambled on about some recipe she'd tried, but her words washed over me. My mind was on the phone. If she was hiding something, it would be in there. And I had every intention of finding it. Later that night, while Emily slept soundly beside me, I made my move. Her phone was on the nightstand, charging. I slipped out of bed as quietly as possible, the floor creaking under my weight. My heart pounded in my chest as I grabbed her phone and tiptoed out of the bedroom. In the kitchen, I unlocked it with ease. She'd never bothered to change the passcode, still assuming I was too trusting to snoop. The moment the screen lit up, my suspicions were confirmed. Text after text filled the screen, all to a contact labeled Jake. They weren't exactly subtle. "Jake, miss you, babe. Can't wait for Friday. Emily, same here. Can't stand another night with him. Another night with him. Me." She was referring to me like I was a chore to endure. The words hit like a punch to the gut. But I kept scrolling, forcing myself to read every sordid detail of their conversations. She complained about my habits, my work hours, even the way I folded laundry. And Jake? He lapped it up, egging her on with compliments and promises of a better life. But the worst was yet to come. One thread stood out, a series of messages about hiring a private investigator. Emily was paranoid I might be hiding assets, something she could use against me if she decided to leave. She didn't just want to betray me, she wanted to ruin me. My hand shook as I set the phone down. Every ounce of trust I'd ever placed in her had been obliterated in those messages. The woman I'd married, the woman I thought I'd build a life with, was nothing more than a liar with a pretty face. The next morning, I didn't mention the phone. Instead, I acted as if everything was normal. Emily seemed none the wiser, laughing and chatting like nothing was wrong. But I noticed the little things now, the way her phone was never out of reach, the way she hesitated before answering my questions about her plans. Every detail felt like another crack in the mask she wore. I called Mark again that afternoon, filling him in on what I'd found. "We have what we need to move forward," he said confidently. "But you need to stay calm. Don't tip her off." Calm wasn't exactly my strong suit at the moment, but I knew he was right. If Emily thought I was onto her, she'd double down on whatever plan she was hatching. I had to stay one step ahead. That evening, Emily announced she was going out with friends. "Girls' night," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Don't wait up." I nodded, feigning disinterest. "Have fun," I said, watching her grab her purse and practically sprint out the door. As soon as she was gone, I grabbed my own keys and followed. She didn't go to a bar. She didn't go to a friend's house. Instead, she drove to a dingy motel on the edge of town, parking her car in the back lot. I sat in my car, watching as she got out and was greeted by a tall man with a cocky smirk, "Jake." My grip on the steering wheel tightened until my knuckles turned white. I'd seen enough. My wife was more than just unfaithful, she was a schemer, a liar, and a manipulator. And now, I had the evidence to prove it. As I drove away, my mind was already racing with plans. Emily thought she had me cornered, but she was wrong. The game had changed, and I wasn't playing to lose. The motel encounter was the final nail in the coffin. Watching Emily and Jake embrace, their body language screaming familiarity, I knew there was no salvaging this marriage. But I wasn't content with just walking away. Emily's betrayal wasn't just personal, it was calculated, ruthless. She thought she was outsmarting me, but she was about to learn the hard way that I wasn't the fool she believed I was. Driving home, my mind churned with plans. Emily was expecting me to roll over, to be the passive, clueless husband she could walk all over. I was done playing that role. I spent the night drafting a list, every step I needed to take, every loose end I had to tie up. Revenge wasn't just about satisfaction, it was about control, about ensuring she couldn't destroy me in the process. The next morning, Emily acted as though nothing had happened. She hummed a tune in the kitchen, frying eggs and pouring coffee like the perfect wife. Her nonchalance was almost impressive. If I didn't know better, I might have believed her act. But now, her every move felt like an insult. "Morning, sweetheart," she said, setting a plate of eggs in front of me. "Morning," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. I couldn't let her see even a flicker of the anger burning inside me. "Busy day today?" "Not really," she said with a shrug, sipping her coffee. "Might head to the gym, maybe do some shopping." Her lies slid out so easily, so effortlessly. I nodded, pretending to focus on my breakfast while mentally preparing for the day ahead. My lawyer, Mark, had already set the wheels in motion. Bank accounts were being scrutinized, documents were being prepared, and every shred of evidence against Emily was being compiled. But there was one more thing I needed to do, something that would ensure her downfall. Later that afternoon, I called an old friend, Mike, who worked in private security. Mike and I had gone through college together, and he'd built a career on surveillance and investigation. If anyone could help me uncover the full extent of Emily's deceit, it was him. "Mike," I said when he picked up, "I need a favor. And it's a big one." I explained the situation, leaving nothing out. The phone conversation was tense, punctuated by Mike's low whistles of disbelief. "Man, that's brutal," he said finally. "But you came to the right guy. I'll get my team on it. Give me a couple of days." "Thanks, Mike," I said, relief flooding through me. "I owe you." "No, you don't. Just promise me you won't do anything stupid." I chuckled darkly. "No promises." While Mike worked his magic, I started planting seeds of doubt in Emily's world. It was subtle at first, a casual mention of how work was going well, how I might be in line for a big promotion. I knew she'd latch onto the idea, that her scheming mind would immediately start calculating how she could benefit from my supposed success. The more I fed her this narrative, the more I saw her guard drop. She even started being overly affectionate, probably trying to secure her position as the supportive wife. It was almost laughable, watching her try to play the role of a doting partner while sneaking off to her lover behind my back. But I let her believe she was winning, that her little game was going unnoticed. 2 days later, Mike called with an update. "You were right," he said grimly. "Your wife's been busy. The guy she's seeing, Jake, isn't just her lover. He's her partner in crime." "What do you mean?" I asked, the knot in my stomach tightening. "They're plotting to bleed you dry. She's been moving money into an account under Jake's name, and they're planning to skip town once she gets what she wants." I sat in stunned silence, gripping the phone so hard it creaked. Emily wasn't just cheating, she was actively trying to ruin me. It was one thing to betray me emotionally, but financially? That was war. "Send me everything you've got," I said finally. "Every transaction, every message. I want it all." "Already done," Mike said. "Check your email. And hey, man, be careful. People like this don't play fair." I thanked him and hung up, opening the email on my laptop. As I scrolled through the evidence, my anger boiled over. Screenshots of bank transfers, photos of Emily and Jake meeting at discrete locations, and even audio recordings of their conversations, it was all there, a damning dossier that painted a clear picture of their betrayal. That night, I made my move. While Emily was out, undoubtedly meeting Jake, I called Mark and laid out the plan. "We're filing for divorce," I said, my voice steady. "And I want to hit her where it hurts. Freeze the accounts, file an injunction, whatever it takes to stop her from taking another cent." Mark agreed without hesitation, his tone matching my resolve. "Consider it done. We'll serve her the papers tomorrow." By the time Emily returned home, I was sitting in the living room, waiting. She walked in with a cheery, "Hey, babe," but froze when she saw the look on my face. "We need to talk," I said coldly. Her smile faltered, confusion and panic flashing across her features. "What's wrong?" I stood, holding up a stack of papers. "Everything, Emily. Everything is wrong." As I watched the color drain from her face, I felt the faintest flicker of satisfaction. The game was over, and it was my turn to play. Emily stared at the stack of papers in my hand as if they were a venomous snake. Her wide eyes darted between my face and the documents, her carefully constructed facade beginning to crack. What is this?" she stammered, her voice trembling. I set the papers on the coffee table with a deliberate motion, keeping my gaze locked on hers. "This, Emily, is proof. Proof of every lie you've told, every scheme you've plotted. Proof of what you've become." Her jaw tightened, her expression shifting from confusion to defiance. "What are you talking about? You're not making any sense." I leaned forward, my voice low and controlled. "I'm talking about Jake. About the money you've been siphoning into his account. About the private investigator you hired to dig into my life, hoping to find dirt on me. I know everything, Emily. Every single thing." Her face turned a ghostly shade of pale. For a moment, she looked like she might deny it, but then her lips curled into a sneer. "So what? You've been so wrapped up in your work, you didn't even notice. Do you have any idea what it's like to be married to someone who barely pays attention to you?" Ah, there it was, her attempt to deflect, to make this about me. I didn't let her off the hook. "Don't even try that," I snapped, my voice rising. "This isn't about me being busy. This is about you betraying me, lying to my face every day while you plan to destroy me behind my back." You don't get to play the victim here. She crossed her arms, her chin jutting out stubbornly. Maybe if you weren't such a boring, predictable husband, I wouldn't have needed to find excitement elsewhere. Her words were like a slap, but I refused to let them see me flinch. Instead, I stood up, towering over her as I pointed to the papers. Excitement? This isn't about excitement, Emily. This is about greed. You weren't just unfaithful, you were calculating, cold, and vicious. You tried to ruin me, and for what? So you could run off with some loser who doesn't even have the decency to keep his nose out of another man's marriage? She glared at me, her bravado slipping. You don't understand. Stop, I cut her off. I don't want to hear your excuses. This is over. Do you hear me? Over. Her mouth opened and closed, like she wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. Finally, she hissed, You think you're so smart, don't you? Like you're the hero in all of this. Newsflash, Dan, you're just as pathetic as you think I am. I took a step back, shaking my head. The difference is, I'm not the one who broke my vows. I'm not the one who tore this marriage apart. The rest of the night passed in tense silence. Emily retreated to the bedroom, slamming the door behind her, while I stayed in the living room, my mind racing. The confrontation had been satisfying in a way, but it also left me feeling hollow. This was the woman I had loved, trusted, and shared my life with. And now? Now she was just a stranger wearing Emily's face. But there was no time to dwell on the emotions. The wheels were already in motion, and there was no turning back. The divorce papers would be served the next morning, and Mark had assured me that Emily wouldn't be able to touch another dime of our joint finances. I spent the rest of the night gathering any remaining evidence I could find. Emails, receipts, anything that painted a clear picture of Emily's deceit. By the time I finished, the first rays of dawn were creeping through the windows, and exhaustion weighed heavy on me. But I didn't stop. I couldn't. Not until this nightmare was behind me. When the knock came at the door later that day, I was ready. Emily had spent the morning sulking, barely acknowledging me as she drank her coffee in stony silence. But when she opened the door to find a process server standing there with an envelope in hand, her composure crumbled. What the hell is this? She demanded, ripping the envelope open. It's exactly what you think it is, I said from the couch, not bothering to look up. Divorce papers. Her shriek of anger echoed through the house. You're divorcing me? After everything I've put up with, you have the audacity to do this to me? I stood up, turning to face her with a cold, unflinching stare. This isn't something I'm doing to you, Emily. It's something you did to yourself. Actions have consequences, and now you get to face them. She threw the papers at me, her face twisted in fury. You're going to regret this, Dan. You'll regret ever messing with me. I smirked, crossing my arms. I'm sure Jake will be a great comfort to you when you're living off his paycheck. Her eyes blazed with hatred, but she didn't say another word. Instead, she stormed out of the house, slamming the door so hard the walls shook. For a moment, I stood there, staring at the closed door. Then, slowly, I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. As the hours passed, the silence in the house grew deafening. But for the first time, it wasn't the kind of silence that made me feel small or insignificant. It was the kind of silence that came with clarity, with freedom. Emily was gone, and while the path ahead was uncertain, it was mine to walk. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt like I was in control of my life. I wasn't a fool. Emily might try to retaliate, to make things even messier. But I was ready. She had underestimated me once, and that had been her fatal mistake. This wasn't just about revenge anymore, it was about reclaiming my dignity, my peace, and my future. The house felt eerily quiet in the hours after Emily stormed out. For years, this home had been a place of shared memories, some good, some bad, but now it felt like a battleground. I sat at the kitchen table, sipping coffee that had gone cold, staring blankly at the papers she'd thrown back at me. Her threats echoed in my mind. "You'll regret messing with me." If this was her version of regret, I'd hate to see what victory looked like. The next morning, Mark called with an update. "Dan, we've got everything locked down. Joint accounts are frozen, and I've filed for a restraining order to prevent her from making any large withdrawals." "Good," I said, though a part of me bristled at how messy this had all become. "What about the house?" "She doesn't have a leg to stand on," Mark assured me. "We'll argue it's your primary residence, and given her actions, I don't see a judge siding with her." Hearing that gave me some relief, but it was fleeting. Emily wasn't the type to slink away quietly. She'd made that much clear. By the afternoon, the fallout had begun in earnest. Emily's family started calling, her sister, her mother, even her cousin who lived out of state. I ignored most of them, but when her mother left a voicemail accusing me of ruining her daughter's life, I felt my blood boil. Ruined her life? If only they knew the truth. Finally, I decided to call back her sister, Lisa. Unlike the rest of Emily's family, Lisa had always seemed grounded and reasonable. If anyone could be made to see reason, it was her. "Dan," Lisa said when she picked up, her voice cautious. "I was hoping you'd call back. If you're calling to defend Emily." "I'm not," she interrupted. I want to know what's going on. She's been calling everyone, saying you blindsided her with divorce papers. That you're trying to take everything from her." I let out a bitter laugh. "Of course she's playing the victim. Did she also mention she's been cheating on me? That she's been siphoning money into an account for her boyfriend and planning to leave me broke?" There was a long pause. "Cheating?" Lisa finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Cheating, stealing, lying, you name it," I said. "I have the evidence to prove it, Lisa. I wouldn't have filed for divorce if this was just about a bad argument." Lisa sighed, and I could hear the tension in her voice. I knew she wasn't happy, but I didn't think she'd go this far. "Well, she did," I said bluntly. "And now she has to deal with the consequences." Lisa didn't argue, and for that, I was grateful. She promised to speak to her mother and at least try to calm the family down. It was a small victory, but I'd take it. Meanwhile, Emily was busy trying to salvage her own narrative. Over the next few days, friends and acquaintances began reaching out, some curious, others outright hostile. It was clear Emily had been spinning her own version of events, painting herself as the poor, mistreated wife who had been blindsided by my paranoia. But for every sympathetic ear she found, I had the truth on my side. I didn't bother responding to most people, but when one particularly nosy mutual friend texted me asking if it was true that I'd been abusive, I sent back a single photo, a screenshot of Emily and Jake's incriminating messages. The response was instant. "Oh my God. I had no idea. I'm so sorry, Dan." The tide was beginning to turn. That Friday, I finally confronted Jake. It wasn't planned. I'd gone to grab groceries and spotted him in the parking lot of a hardware store. He was standing by his car, looking every bit as smug as I'd imagined him to be. Something about his casual arrogance ignited a fire in me. I parked my car and walked straight toward him, my footsteps purposeful. He noticed me too late to escape. "Jake," I said, my voice cold. He turned, feigning confusion. "Do I know you?" "You know exactly who I am." My fists clenched at my sides, but I kept my composure. "I'm the guy whose wife you've been sleeping with. The guy whose money you've been stealing." For a moment, he tried to play dumb. "Look, man, I don't know what you're talking about." I laughed, a sharp, humorless sound. "Save it. I've got the evidence. I've seen the texts, the bank transfers, all of it. So don't bother denying it." His cocky demeanor faltered, and he took a step back. "Hey, I don't want any trouble." "Too late for that," I said, stepping closer. "You made this trouble the moment you decided to mess with my life." Jake mumbled something about leaving, but I wasn't done. "Here's the deal," I said, my voice low and threatening. "You stay away from me. You stay away from my money. And you stay the hell away from my life. If you don't, I'll make sure the authorities know about your little involvement in Emily's schemes. Do you understand me?" He nodded, swallowing hard. "Yeah. Got it." I walked away without another word, leaving him pale and shaken in the parking lot. That night, I sat alone in the living room, a glass of whiskey in hand. The house was still, the silence no longer oppressive but peaceful. Emily had underestimated me, and now she was reaping the consequences of her betrayal. I didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, I felt something close to hope. The worst was behind me, and now it was time to start rebuilding, on my own terms. The encounter with Jake gave me a grim satisfaction, but it also left me with a deep sense of exhaustion. Confronting him was just one piece of the puzzle. Emily was still out there, spinning her web of lies, and I wasn't naive enough to think she'd give up without a fight. The next morning, Mark called again with an update. "Dan, I've filed an official motion to freeze any accounts tied to her or her accomplice. We've got the documentation lined up for court, but I'll need you there to testify about what you've experienced." "I'll be there," I said firmly. If Emily thought she could keep spinning her narrative in court, she was in for a rude awakening. That afternoon, Emily came back to the house. I heard her car in the driveway and the click of her heels as she stormed through the door. She was on the warpath, her face twisted in anger as she threw her bag onto the counter. "We need to talk," she snapped, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "About what?" I asked coolly, not bothering to look up from my laptop. "Don't play dumb," she spat. "You've frozen my accounts, Dan. I can't even pay my phone bill. How am I supposed to survive?" I set the laptop aside and stood, crossing my arms as I faced her. "You're asking me how you're supposed to survive? After everything you've done?" She scoffed, rolling her eyes. "Oh, don't be so dramatic. You're acting like I killed someone." "You didn't kill someone, Emily," I said, my voice rising. "But you killed this marriage. You killed the trust, the love, everything that made us work. And now, you're reaping what you sowed." Her eyes narrowed, her voice dripping with venom. "You think you're so righteous, don't you? Like you're the victim in all of this. You weren't perfect, Dan. You're boring, predictable, and so wrapped up in yourself that you didn't even see this coming." Her words stung, but I refused to let her see it. Instead, I stepped closer, lowering my voice. "You're right, Emily. I didn't see this coming. Because I believed in you. I believed in us. And you took that belief and turned it into a weapon." For a moment, she faltered, her bravado cracking. But then she squared her shoulders, defiance hardening her expression. "You're going to regret this," she said through gritted teeth. "I promise you, Dan, you haven't seen the last of me." "I'm counting on it," I said, my voice like ice. "Because the more you fight, the worse it'll be for you. I've got the truth on my side, Emily." "What do you have?" Her face flushed with anger, and for a moment, I thought she might lash out. But instead, she grabbed her bag and stormed out, slamming the door so hard the frame rattled. The days that followed were a blur of meetings with Mark, court filings, and preparing for the legal battles ahead. Emily made good on her promise to make things difficult, filing her own motions and trying to twist the story in her favor. But she underestimated the strength of the evidence we had. Emails. Texts. Financial records. Mike's surveillance reports. Everything painted a damning picture of her betrayal and deceit. Mark was relentless, presenting our case with precision and confidence. Each time Emily's lawyer tried to poke holes in our argument, Mark shut them down with cold, hard facts. Watching Emily squirm in court was both painful and satisfying. Part of me still couldn't believe this was the same woman I'd once loved, the woman I'd imagined spending my life with. But every time I felt a pang of regret, I reminded myself of the lies, the schemes, the cold calculation behind her actions. Outside of court, Emily tried another tactic, playing the victim in the court of public opinion. Mutual friends began calling, texting, asking questions, and expressing their shock at how cruel I was being to her. But I refused to engage. I let the truth speak for itself, and as more people learned the full story, her support began to dwindle. Even Lisa, her sister, called me again to apologize. "I don't know what's wrong with her," she said, her voice heavy with shame. "She's not the person I thought she was." "Neither was I admitted. But I'm done trying to figure her out. I just want this over with." Weeks turned into months, and slowly, I began to feel the weight lifting. The court proceedings wrapped up in my favor, Emily was denied any claim to the house or my assets, and Jake's involvement had landed him in legal trouble of his own. The day the divorce was finalized, I sat in my lawyer's office, staring at the papers that marked the end of a chapter one never imagined would end this way. "How do you feel?" Mark asked, sliding a pen across the table. I hesitated before picking it up, my hand hovering over the dotted line. "Lighter," I said finally. "Freer." Mark nodded. "This is a new beginning, Dan. Use it well." That evening, I sat on the porch, watching the sunset. For the first time in what felt like forever, the silence wasn't oppressive. It was peaceful. I wasn't consumed by anger, betrayal, or regret. Instead, I felt a strange sense of calm. Emily had tried to destroy me, but she'd failed. And in the process, I'd rediscovered a part of myself I thought I'd lost, the part that could stand tall, face adversity, and come out stronger on the other side. I sipped my drink, letting the cool evening air wash over me. Life wasn't perfect, but it was mine again. The divorce papers were signed, the courtroom battles were behind me, and Emily was officially out of my life. But the scars she left weren't so easily erased. For weeks after everything was finalized, I found myself waking up in the middle of the night, my mind replaying every argument, every lie, every smug look she gave when she thought she'd outsmarted me. But I wasn't going to let her haunt me forever. One morning, I stood in the living room and looked around. The house felt empty, not just because Emily was gone, but because it was a shell of what it used to be. Every piece of furniture, every decoration, every corner of the space held memories, some good, but now mostly tainted. It was time to make a change. I started small. The first thing to go was the bedroom set. That mattress, those pillows, they'd witnessed too much. I replaced them with something new, something that was entirely mine. Next came the photos. Emily had loved covering the walls with framed pictures of us, but now those pictures felt like lies staring back at me. I boxed them up and shoved them in the attic, where they could collect dust until I decided what to do with them. From there, the changes became bigger. I repainted the walls, choosing bold, rich colors that felt like a reflection of who I wanted to be rather than the subdued tones Emily had preferred. I replaced the old furniture with pieces I'd picked out for myself, each one a declaration of independence. It wasn't just redecorating, it was reclaiming the space, making it mine again. As the house began to feel more like my own, I started to focus on my routine. Emily had been such a dominant force in my life that I'd let her needs and desires overshadow my own. Now, I had the freedom to rediscover what made me happy. I picked up old hobbies I'd abandoned, playing the guitar, going for long hikes, even trying my hand at cooking again. I'd always enjoyed experimenting in the kitchen, but Emily had been quick to criticize my messy style, so I'd stopped. Now, there was no one to critique my technique or roll their eyes when I burned something. And if I messed up, I could laugh about it and try again. One weekend, I decided to tackle something I'd always wanted to do but never had the time for, a road trip. I packed a bag, filled the tank, and set off with no specific destination in mind. I drove through winding mountain roads, stopped at small diners for coffee and pie, and let the open road clear my mind. It wasn't a cure-all, but it helped. Each mile between me and my old life felt like a step toward healing. Emily, predictably, didn't disappear quietly. A month after the divorce, I got a text from her out of the blue. "Hey. Can we talk?" I stared at the screen, a mixture of annoyance and curiosity bubbling up. Against my better judgment, I replied. "What do you want?" She called immediately, and against my instincts, I answered. "Dan," she began, her voice soft, almost pleading. "I've been doing a lot of thinking, and I made mistakes. Big ones." I said nothing, letting her words hang in the air. She continued. "I was hurt, okay? I didn't know how to deal with it, and I lashed out. But I want to make things right. Can we just talk? Maybe have dinner? Just to clear the air." I almost laughed. Dinner? Clear the air? After everything she'd done? But instead, I took a deep breath and responded with the calm she didn't deserve. "No, Emily. We don't need to talk. We don't need to have dinner. The air is clear on my end. You made your choices, and now we're both living with them." There was a pause, then a sharp intake of breath. "So that's it? You're just going to shut me out completely?" "Yes," I said simply. "That's it." I hung up before she could respond, then blocked her number. The chapter was closed, and I wasn't about to let her reopen it. As time passed, I found myself reflecting less on the betrayal and more on what I'd learned from it. Emily's actions had been cruel, but they'd forced me to reevaluate my life. I realized I'd spent so much time trying to please her, to meet her expectations, that I'd forgotten to ask myself what I truly wanted. One evening, I sat on the back porch with a journal, something I hadn't done since college. I began writing down the lessons I'd learned, the goals I wanted to pursue, and the person I wanted to become. It was cathartic, a way to process everything and channel it into something positive. I wrote about trust, how I'd given it freely, maybe too freely, and how I'd learned to value it more. I wrote about resilience, how I'd discovered a strength in myself I didn't know I had. And I wrote about freedom, the freedom to build a life that was truly mine, without compromise or deceit. Eventually, life settled into a new normal. The house, now completely transformed, felt like a sanctuary instead of a battlefield. My work, which I'd neglected during the chaos, became a source of pride again. And my social life, once entangled with Emily's friends and drama, began to flourish in new directions. I reconnected with old friends, joined a hiking club, and even went on a few dates. Nothing serious, but enough to remind me that not everyone was like Emily. One night, as I sat on the couch strumming my guitar, a thought struck me. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was thriving. The betrayal, the heartbreak, the anger, they hadn't defined me. I'd taken control of my life and turned it into something better. And for the first time in a long time, I felt genuinely happy. Months turned into a year, and the weight of everything I'd endured gradually faded into the background. The life I was building, step by step, felt like a triumph, a testament to the strength I didn't know I possessed. Emily's presence had become a distant memory, like a bad dream I'd finally woken up from. I hadn't heard from her since that last desperate phone call. According to Mark, she'd moved out of state, likely to start fresh with Jake or whatever new scheme she'd cooked up. Her absence was a gift, a clean slate I wasn't about to take for granted. One crisp autumn morning, I was in the middle of a hike, my boots crunching over fallen leaves, when my phone buzzed. It was Lisa, Emily's sister. Her name on the screen brought an unexpected wave of nostalgia, mixed with unease. After a moment's hesitation, I answered. "Lisa," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "Dan," she replied, her voice warm but cautious. "I know it's been a while, but I wanted to check in. How have you been?" "I've been good," I said honestly. "Really good. How about you?" We exchanged small talk for a few minutes, the conversation surprisingly comfortable. But then Lisa sighed, and I knew there was something more. "Listen," she said, her voice soft. "I thought you should know, Emily and Jake are done. He ran out on her after draining her bank account. She's not doing well." I paused mid-step, the irony almost too perfect to believe. "I see," I said carefully. "And why are you telling me this?" "I'm not saying it to make you feel bad," Lisa said quickly. "I just thought you'd want to know. I know what she did was unforgivable, but she's still my sister. And, well, she's lost everything." I didn't feel bad, not in the way Lisa might have hoped. Instead, I felt a strange sense of vindication. Emily had set out to destroy me, but in the end, she'd only destroyed herself. "I appreciate you letting me know," I said finally. "But I've moved on, Lisa. I hope she finds her way, but her path and mine don't cross anymore." Lisa seemed to understand. "I figured as much. Take care, Dan." "You too," I said, ending the call. As I slipped the phone back into my pocket, I looked out at the trail ahead. The trees swayed gently in the breeze, their golden leaves shimmering in the sunlight. It struck me how peaceful everything was, how much lighter I felt, knowing I was no longer tethered to Emily's chaos. That evening, I sat on my porch with a glass of wine, reflecting on everything that had happened. The old version of me might have felt some lingering sadness for Emily, some misplaced responsibility to fix things or offer her forgiveness. But the man I'd become knew better. Her downfall wasn't my burden to carry. She'd made her choices, and I'd made mine. And mine had led me here, to a life that was finally mine to shape. Weeks later, as I was clearing out some old boxes, I stumbled across a photo album I hadn't seen since before the divorce. My first instinct was to toss it aside, but curiosity got the better of me. I flipped through the pages, each snapshot a reminder of a different time. There were pictures of our wedding, Emily's radiant smile lighting up the frame. Photos from vacations, holidays, and quiet moments at home. At first, I felt a pang of sadness, but then I realized something: those memories weren't just hers. They were mine too. And while the ending had been bitter, not every part of our time together was tainted. I closed the album and set it back in the box, a faint smile tugging at my lips. It wasn't forgiveness exactly, but it was something close: acceptance. Life continued to unfold in ways I hadn't anticipated. A few months later, I met someone, Rachel. She was nothing like Emily. She was grounded, honest, and unafraid to share her imperfections. We started slow, both cautious after our past experiences, but over time, something real began to grow between us. Rachel wasn't a savior or a replacement. She didn't come into my life to fix what was broken. Instead, she became a partner, someone who walked alongside me as I continued to rebuild myself. And for the first time in years, I felt the stirrings of hope for the future. One evening, as Rachel and I sat on the porch watching the sunset, she turned to me with a curious smile. "You never talk much about your past," she said gently. "I know it must have been hard." I took a deep breath, considering her words. It was, I admitted. But it taught me a lot. About myself. About what I want, and what I deserve. She nodded, her hand resting on mine. Well, for what it's worth, I think you turned out pretty amazing. I chuckled, squeezing her hand. Thanks, Rachel. That means more than you know. Looking back, I realized that Emily's betrayal, as painful as it had been, was the catalyst for a transformation I hadn't known I needed. It forced me to confront my own blind spots, to reclaim my identity, and to build a life rooted in authenticity and strength. If there was one thing I'd learned, it was this: life doesn't end with betrayal. It begins again. And sometimes, the hardest endings lead to the most beautiful beginnings. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of gold and crimson, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. The past was behind me, the future stretched out ahead, and for the first time in a long time, I was exactly where I was meant to be.